Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network. I am your host, Ange, and I welcome you to episode number 5. Today's podcast focuses on self-care. We are thrilled to have our guest, Linda, joining us. Linda is a senior project manager with a Fortune 50 healthcare company. She previously wrote a blog post titled Real Self-Care, Sitting Here Being Me, that we published on our website on February 26, 2023. We are excited for her to share it with the podcast community today and provide additional insight into what it means to her and her mental health. So, what are we waiting for? Fill up your coffee and let's get started. I want to welcome everyone to episode number 5 of Coffee and Conversation. And today I am very excited to have a dear friend as a guest. Linda and I have known each other for 20 years, maybe?
It sounds at least that long, a little longer.
Yes.
I've been married 21 years and I knew you before then.
Oh, that's right. So we have been friends for a long time. I have admired Linda's ability to write. She's really good at writing and being very intuitive to deeper thoughts in the work that she does. Secondly, I think over the past 21 plus years, just the growth of seeing self-care and how it ties into mental health and me as a human being and my relationship with my partner and my relationship with my kids, my relationship with work and how important that self-care is. And I'm grateful because Linda wrote a blog post earlier this year dealing with self-care to tie that into how valuable it is with mental health. The first 4 episodes have been really deep and we've talked a lot about addiction and suicide and those types of challenges. And so this episode is meant to be a little bit of a breath of fresh air to talk about what are some healthy coping mechanisms that we can use. And Linda was amazing. And when I asked her, will you be on the podcast? She said, absolutely. And so, Linda, I'm going to maybe turn it over to you. My first question to you is, why are you passionate about this topic? What advice do you have in the very beginning to kick off into why you're here today?
Thank you. I am so happy to be here just because you're a dear friend and I get to talk to you. I'm so proud of the work that you are doing and so excited about Recovery Advocate Network and just all aspects. I've learned so much from listening to the first 4 episodes and just from knowing you and how passionate you are about mental health. But like everyone else, I've been touched by mental health issues in my own family, in my community and friendship circles. And I identify as having anxiety. I was an anxious little kid. And so I would start, while I'm going to talk about self-care in kind of a lighter way, I want to also acknowledge that a part of self-care is that I take medication for anxiety. So it's not either or. Whatever your mental health challenge is, while there are things that you can do yourself to take care of yourself at the same time, I do think it's certainly not exclusive of treating it appropriately, medically and clinically. So part of self-care for me was talking to my primary care physician about my anxiety and taking my medication daily. So I just kind of wanted to say that first before I got into some of the maybe lighter aspects of self-care that I enjoy so much and am happy to share. And I was thinking when you first asked me, or as I thought about what I would talk about, I'm not an expert on self-care. What could I possibly teach anybody about self-care? But I decided that I am an expert on self-care because I'm an expert on taking care of myself. Who better to be an expert on yourself than you? No one knows me better than I know myself. And so I think we can all strive to be self-care experts just by learning about ourselves, paying attention to our bodies and our minds, and working together to take good care of ourselves.
I think my heart just exploded with that. Who better than ourselves to talk about self-care for ourselves? That is deep and amazing. I think it's something I'm going to reiterate to myself frequently.
Well, do you want me to go ahead and read the blog post that I shared on Recovery Advocate Network blog?
Sure. So as you know, we have a website and we are open to being guests on the podcast. So if you're interested in being on the podcast, you would email podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. And we also are passionate about individuals who maybe you don't want to be on the podcast, but you would like to share a blog post. And if you're interested in that, you can email blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. Maybe read the blog post that you wrote earlier this year, and then let's talk about it.
And I would encourage others to, as you said, consider sharing a blog post, because some of us write more easily than we talk, and it helps us get our thoughts organized to write them. So I really enjoyed having the opportunity to write this blog post, and I'll share it now. Real self-care. The term self-care is so overused, it's nearly lost all meaning. It's become a buzzword for marketing, everything from overpriced skincare products to spiritual healing retreats in exotic locales. A Google search for self-care marketing produces a long list of product categories, including poop stools. I don't even want to know. Taken at face value, though, self-care simply means caring for oneself. And caring for yourself starts with knowing yourself. Just as taking good care of a baby requires a basic understanding of an infant's needs, nutrition, sleep, hygiene, safety, comfort, sensory stimulation, loving touch. Taking good care of myself requires that I understand my own physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. Knowing yourself is a lifelong project. There's always more to learn. Having lived in my body for more than 58 years, and as a sensitive introvert living with anxiety, I've observed some patterns. I've identified a few things that have a consistently negative effect on my mood and well-being. Dim light, harsh overhead fluorescent light, clutter, disorganized space, being overscheduled, for example, back-to-back meetings, multiple social events on the same day, uncomfortable, restrictive, scratchy clothing, and being around people who are volatile and prone to anger and yelling. With that understanding of myself, here are some of my self-care practices. Spending time outside, keeping my home straightened, building alone time to rest, read, and relax into my schedule every week, developing a small group of kind, emotionally mature friends, arranging my home office so that I face the window and am exposed to natural light while working, avoiding big box stores, wearing lots of soft clothes like leggings, t-shirts, flannel, cozy wool socks, almost never wearing a bra, maintaining a stash of emergency dark chocolate, and enhancing my physical space with fresh flowers, playing music, diffusing lavender oil, or burning a patchouli candle. Note that most of my self-care practices are low or no cost. Taking a walk outside after work, loading the dishwasher, and then reading for 30 minutes are often the best things I can do for myself when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. That shit's free. I mean, it could be free if I got books from the library. Your list could be completely different. Maybe for you, self-care means having a pet, going to the gym, or giving yourself permission not to keep your house perfectly tidy. You do you. I'll just be over here, sitting out on my porch in my comfy clothes with my book, taking care of myself.
I love every bit of that. You do you. I'll just be over here doing me, and you be wherever you're at doing you. That is amazing. Where are you now? So I'm looking back. This blog post, we published it back in February. So now we're in July. In that period of time, maybe a couple of things to think about. Are there some new self-care areas that you've identified? Are there some challenges that you've identified? What additional advice would you give to everyone?
Those are really good questions because it does change over time. And I think the key is really paying attention to yourself, to noticing things that affect your mood, to when you feel stressed or overwhelmed or off balance, and then noticing when you feel better and calm and really paying attention to the things that impact you. So as you know, I live in Atlanta and it's hot, hot, hot here. So I've been trying to balance that because it is still really important for me to have some time outside. But as you know, I'm battling mosquitoes as well as heat. So having to be more creative about getting that sunshine, which just is so important to my well-being and self-care. But I think I'm trying to pay more attention lately to moving my body just for self-care and just for the fact that, as irritating as it is, I actually do feel better when I walk or do some little routine every day, a little yoga video or something that helps me get centered while I'm moving my body. So that's something that is maybe kind of a struggle for me because I would rather do some of those other things I would listen. I would rather just sit down with a book, listen to music. But I can listen to music while I'm walking, so I have to kind of balance the rewards to sometimes to get yourself to do something that you know is good self-care, that you know is good for you, but it's hard to get motivated in the moment. So a little rewards like that help me a lot. If I have a podcast that I do actually have a podcast that I only listen to when I'm walking, so that makes that kind of a special time and give me something to look forward to wonder what's going to happen next on that podcast.
Wow, I love that.
But overall, I think just probably listing these practices was really good for me because it did solidify my awareness of them. And so now it makes me think about, why don't I buy some flowers so that I have them in my space? Because I've already identified that as something that just makes me feel better. As kind of a sensitive, introverted person, I'm very influenced by my physical environment. So that a lot of that theme of having a neat space and just having music and plants indoor, bringing the outdoors in to having plants in your house, that's like there's science behind how that makes you happier. Continuing to pay attention to my environment is just, I'm feeling pretty good about myself.
Some of the things that really stood out to me are things that I think are so important, and there is a lot of science backing. I'm not going to go to the effort to pull out all the scientific references to it. However, I'm going to make this broad stroke comment. Scientific research, from what I know, has shown that lighting impacts your mental health, that clutter in different ways can impact your mental health. And I love what you said about clutter, because you said giving yourself freedom to just saying it's okay the way that it is. It doesn't have to be perfectly organized. Clutter being a key component. Boundaries. Oh my gosh. You probably, of all of potential guests at this point, you're going to love this. When I talk to my team members at the company that I run, I constantly talk about the Townsend and Cloud book, Boundaries. I tell everyone to read it. I love the sentence in the book that says, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to describe why this, that, and the other. And I think in our self-care and our mental health as it ties to self-care, understanding that saying no to being overscheduled is so healthy. It's okay. You don't need to tell the individual why you're not going to come to the party. You're just not available to come to the party. And that's enough. That's it. It's enough. I love that part of it. I also very much love the uncomfortable, restrictive, scratchy clothing. I'm also all about not wearing bras. So amen to that component of it. And then when you tie into talking about time outside, one of the things and moving your body, which is what you were just describing, one of the things I was thinking about is that in 2022, from January to March, I did this big self-care revitalization of Ange. Every day was really good for 3 months at doing meditation, yoga, and my gratitude list. And when I started it in January of 2022, I was just like, whatever. Science says I should do it, so I'm going to do it. I remember in February, I thought, this is bullshit. I mean, I can't think of another word for it. But then by the time the end of the third month hit, I really could tell a huge difference in myself. And unfortunately, I then moved to California and slacked off on that. And so some of those self-care items are on my to-do list to add back, to get back to the meditation, to get back to the yoga, to get back to the gratitude list. And one of the things that you just said, making a list of the different items in self-care, because every individual is different. So I love that idea of taking a step back and saying, okay, what does self-care mean to me? Does it mean going to bed at a certain time every night? Does it mean that I am going to block off these hours to do something with my partner? Does it mean that I'm going to now do these habits? And we talk about habits. I've recently started working with different habit trackers. So you can find a lot of different apps online. Some of those are, did I laugh today? That's one on my habit tracker that I go in every day. It pops up. Have I laughed today? And that's a piece of self-care. And so I love that idea of just taking a step back and looking at it. And I think one of the things I wanted then transition to asking you is I kind of pushed you at some point to, hey, consider doing these gratitude lists each day. and you have completely crushed it. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are when I first sent it to you, maybe what you thought. And then every day when you do those gratitude lists, what you're thinking along those journeys.
Thank you for bringing that up. And I do need to actually get back to being more consistent about the gratitude list, because you're right. For a long time, pretty much both of us were doing them every single day and texting them to each other, which is part of the fun, is seeing someone else's gratitude list. And I too have gotten to doing it more like a few times a week. And I really want to get back to the daily practice of gratitude for the reasons you said. It seems at first you're kind of whatever, and then a lot of evidence studies show that gratitude is just a wonderful practice that makes a big difference in your own mood and well-being. And you're right. When you introduced me to the particular app that we've used for gratitude lists, and initially I was doing it as a friend for you. I think, I wanted to hear from you every day and know how you were doing. So I was kind of doing it in a more supportive thing of going along with your gratitude practice. But very, very quickly, I began to appreciate it for myself and really found that identifying 5 or 6 things every day that I was grateful for is not that hard and is a wonderful reset for a mindset on what can seem like sometimes not a great day. If you think back over it, there are things to be grateful for all around, I find, and I really do appreciate that practice and want to recommit to it.
I think that part of me, I get more joy, frankly, out of reading the gratitude list of other individuals, because I don't know if this is a because or an and. I read the gratitude. So example, when you send me yours, I think, wow, that is something I'm also experiencing that I took for granted. And now when I see it on Linda's list, I need to be grateful for that. And I love the change in my mindset when I'm in a moment of super stressed, woe is me, all of these deadlines, life is chaotic, I'm running this company like da da da. And then I get a gratitude list from a friend and I take a step back and say, whoa, wait. The reality is life is pretty great when we focus on these core things, and it brings so much joy to me. So I love when you send me your gratitude list, and I'm thinking lately, okay, I have to get back. And part of my delay for the listeners is I moved from Atlanta to California. I have this 3-hour time difference. And for some reason in my head, I translated that into those people are not going to want to see your gratitude list at midnight their time. And quite frankly, you probably don't care because you probably have your phone on, right?
Right. I love to wake up to it. It's fine anytime. And I think that's true for most people.
And I love what you started the beginning of our conversation. I think there can be this perspective where the push for self-care individuals may see it as, oh, I should do self-care, and that's a replacement for medical treatment or replacement for medications for certain areas. Or maybe some individuals may hear that and think, I'm less than because I'm doing these things and I still need this medication or I still need these other things. And so I love how you started off with saying, this is not one thing that's going to cure everything. It's a piece of the toolbox that I use. So maybe can you just talk a little bit more, especially because I know you work for a Fortune 50 company in the healthcare space, and maybe just talk about that, about this being a piece of a toolbox and not an end all be all.
Yes, to what you said, I agree completely. And I'm so grateful for the work you're doing and just for the way that our culture has changed over my lifetime. I'm older than you, but mental health treatment, certainly I've seen it, the stigma reduced so that there is much less stigma. Self-care is one piece of the toolkit in addition to appropriate treatment, which can be talk therapy, it can be medication, it can be a wide range of medical, clinical, behavioral health interventions at various times in your life. The other piece is your supportive network of friends, family, colleagues, having other people to support and knowing that while there are things you can do for self-care, none of us are meant to be entirely an island and independent. We're just not made that way. We're made to be interdependent, to be in relationship and community with others. So I think being part of a healthy community where you can reach out to others, you have folks who will be there for you when you really need some help, a nudge or a boost, and aren't really able to motivate yourself. Being part of a healthy community is really vital. So I think all three of those things, medical piece, the self-care piece, and then the community network piece, all come together to support balanced health holistically.
I can't think of a better way to express that. Balance is so vital. So on that topic, one thing I know about you, Linda, and your partner is that both of you are amazing at boundaries. What advice, key phrases you could give to someone about how they can say no to something that doesn't tie into their self-care? What are some ways that you can pause and maybe take a step back and look at the situation and say, hey, participating in this may seem great because it will make me look amazing. It'll tie into these other parts of my personality, but it's going to harm my self-care. How do I then do a healthy boundary and say no to it? Do you have any suggestions that you would provide to individuals for that?
I could probably do a lot better at that myself. When you talked about no being a complete sentence, that's something that I remind myself frequently as well. Just because my partner and I kind of led others in the boundaries books doesn't necessarily make us experts in that area. But one thing I think for myself, to not feel like I have to respond to something immediately, that I can always buy myself time. I mean, obviously it's easier if it's email, but even if someone is asking me something, I don't have to respond on the spot. I can say, let me check my schedule. Let me think about that. Let me talk that over with my partner and see what we've got going on. And I can buy myself some time to, to back away and come back later with a response, which may be absolutely sign me up, or it may be, thank you so much for thinking of me. I do not have the capacity or the bandwidth for that right now. Offer what you can do. Perhaps if somebody's asking you to do, I don't know what, you can say, that event is not going to work for me, but I would love to get together with you later for coffee. I just don't want to go to your big party or something, whatever it is. They offer what you can do if there is something that you can do, but be honest about, as you said, what is just not going to be healthy for you right at that time.
I want to just celebrate all of that. You don't need to give explanations, and then maybe offer, this is what I can do, and this is what fits into my particular calendar or schedule or my abilities, right? I don't want to step outside my abilities. I have a couple of questions. You're a parent, and one of the things that I think about is, how can we as, I'm just going to call us enlightened individuals because we're passionate about mental health and enlightened in this area. So I'm going to basically give us a magic wand and give us this enlightened individuals cloak that we're going to have on. So if you were going to talk to parents about what thoughts you would give to their children coming up. When I think of the next generation and I think about, and I do a lot of work with Georgia Tech and students coming in and mental health at Georgia Tech and it being an elite university, challenges with mental health and not having this baseline of what self-care looks like and how valuable this is. At the company I run now, my day job, I have interns and I have new employees coming out and I try and think of how do I balance out, here's what your trajectory for your career growth goes, and here are your self-care items that you need to be successful. So as a parent, if you were going to talk to other parents, what thoughts would you give to them about how they might empower their children to be kind of self-care advocates or self-care champions or something of that nature? What would you say?
The first thing is leading by example, always. What you do is often more impactful for kids, we know, than what we tell them. They hear what you say when you're not talking to them. They hear everything you say when you're talking to your friends and nothing you say when you're talking to them. Having healthy self-care practices and boundaries for yourself is probably the most important thing as a parent. You know, I see young parents today doing some amazing things, so much better than some previous generations did, just in terms of giving kids language to talk about their own feelings, to identify their own needs, to allow space to have those feelings and needs, to acknowledge that no feeling is wrong. There are behaviors that can be unacceptable, but it's always okay to feel angry or hurt or any way that you feel, to be able to use a word to express that feeling and then talk about how you're going to behave or what you're going to do in response to that feeling. Big on language, and so I love to see young people being able to use their words well to express their needs. And bodily autonomy, I think, is something as parents that, again, maybe future generations are doing a much better job than previous ones did of telling kids that it's up to you whether you touch or hug, or teaching consent about your body. Because I think a lot of us grew up with that, oh, give Aunt so-and-so a hug and give me a kiss, and feeling kind of pressured to do that as children. So I think it's really powerful to teach children really young that you get to make a decision about what feels right for yourself and your body, and that should be respected. My mother actually modeled that because she had a strict rule against tickling in the house. And we said that, little kids would go, stop. And she's like, they said stop. You should stop. I think that's pretty much what I've got. Set the example, teach kids language, and teach them that they have autonomy for their own body and to be able to state what works for them and feels good to them and what doesn't.
Absolutely love that for a gazillion reasons. One, I cannot stand being tickled. So I am on your mom's board, that scenario. And I also believe your body is your body. And I love the idea of parents educating. It's not even educating. I think it's empowering. I want to use the word empowering. I love the idea of parents empowering their children to say, your body is your body. And if something does not feel good to your body, then you have the right, the ability, the privilege, whatever word you want to use, to speak up and just be like, no, this is not okay. And guess what? That is the correlation to no is a complete sentence. I am hug resistant, and
right.
Yeah. And I'm touch resistant. And a lot of my touch resistance comes from severe childhood abuse. the listeners know, I had this kidnapping scenario, and Linda and her partner have just, in my journey of healing and growing, have just been anchors to that. I actually remember, I think the last time I visited, because I'm so touch averse and I'm slowly starting to learn this self-care and this ability to say no that Linda's talked about, is that in a recent visit that I had, I was like, no, I want to give you a hug. And I remember you saying something like, well, you want to give a hug. And it was one of the first times in my life that I remember thinking in my head, this individual totally gets the fact that I love them so much. I am making this decision to give them a hug, not out of obligation, but because I love them, because I have this relationship with them. I just want to focus on that part of it, is that our bodies and our reactions to it, if at some point we can tie them into, what does it say to us? What does it say to our relationships? And not our quote unquote obligations, what society says, because I just think those are times of the past. So I love that component of it. Everything that you said, I envision so much more for the generations that are coming. I'm super excited as they tie to gender identity challenges. Episode 7 that's coming up is going to focus on gender identity challenges and mental health. I think that really, if society took a moment to just take a step back and just say, wow, why don't we just respect the other individuals around us as individual humans, not put them in a category, not a class, not anything they need to, but they're human beings that are amazing the minute they're born. I know you do a lot of work in that area, in the different communities and some of the marches that you do and some of the voice that you have. And I'm so inspired by that.
What you just said, I think that's kind of at the root of all of the isms, right? If we can just see and respect each other as human beings, then that gets at the root of homophobia, but ageism and ableism and everything, because, we started talking about that children, their boundaries should be respected. And that's just what everybody wants, is for their boundaries to be respected. Back to self-care, it's often up to us to establish those boundaries, state what it is that we need and want.
One of the requests we have in this podcast is, what motivational, inspirational quotes are on your list of things, Linda, that you look back and you maybe recite repeatedly when you're having a hard time or you need to be inspired? What would you share with the audience about what you have in that area?
So I've got two. I think that too is something that has changed throughout my life. I would have chosen different things at different times, but I have to share a Martin Luther King Jr. quote, because we mentioned I'm in Atlanta, and I just never cease to be inspired by the wisdom of Dr. King. So one of my favorite quotes from him is this: I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. That is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant. And I love when Dr. King talks about love or peace or nonviolence, because he's coming at it from a place of somebody who is facing hate and violence and is choosing to respond with love and nonviolence. So he acknowledges in this quote that sometimes evil will prevail in certain situations, but he's still choosing love and truth, believing that nothing is more powerful in the end than love and truth. Admire that. Hang on to his wisdom. And then a line from a poem by Wendell Berry says, "Be joyful though you have considered all the facts." So it's related. It's acknowledging that the facts can be pretty bleak. Globally, I think that all of us can agree that there are a lot of things that are not looking too good right now. And certainly in our personal circumstances, often the facts can be pretty discouraging. And yet we can choose joy anyway, that there are still beautiful sunsets, friendships, and laughter every day. There is opportunity for joy. That is something that I try to live by.
That's such a great message to leave on. Choose joy, choose the beautiful sunsets, the beautiful sunrises, choose the memories that you say yes to participating in, choose the lighting in your office so you enjoy, choose your view, choose anything that you can choose that brings happiness and joy to yourself. And then when in doubt, do that gratitude list. Read a gratitude list of somebody else, because oftentimes I know when I read Linda's gratitude list, I think there is something on that list I didn't even think about being grateful for that I need to be grateful for. And that mindset of gratitude and joy and love and peace, just acceptance. Actually, that's what I want to highlight. Acceptance. Individuals from all different walks of life brings so much peace and happiness to me. And if every individual can have peace and happiness, then I don't know what else we can offer to them. Right?
Right. Thank you. You've been just the most wonderful host, and I feel uplifted just from this conversation for sure.
Well, this is awesome. I remember in the beginning of this podcast, Linda made a statement that was very impactful. She said, I don't know that I'm an expert. And then suddenly I realized I'm an expert of me. If anyone listening to this, if you just think about the reality is you're an expert for your own personal experience, and your own personal experience is so valuable to every individual who may listen to this. So I just want to encourage you to submit those, because even if one individual's life is positively impacted by you sharing your journey, you sharing your experience, absolutely amazing. It's worthwhile. So I want to thank you for that. You just listened to episode 5, featuring our guest, Linda, who shared her perspective on self-care and mental health. It was a pleasure to have her, a dear friend, as a guest. I am truly grateful, and I'm going to add that to my gratitude list. I've included a link to her blog post titled Real Self-Care, Sitting Here Being Me, that we published on our website on February 26, 2023 in the show notes. As a reminder, the experiences and advice expressed by these guests are their own stories. Rand is passionate about opening the doors for all voices and experiences, not just those expressed in any particular podcast. If you have found this or other podcast episodes meaningful, we encourage you to share them on your favorite social network. It also helps if you give us an awesome rating so that we are more likely to pop up when someone else needs to hear these stories. If you would like to share your experiences or expertise, we encourage you to be a future guest by emailing us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org or submit a blog post by emailing blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. Thanks for enjoying your coffee with us as we continue sharing these meaningful conversations together. In case you're wondering, every individual working with Rand does so on a 100% volunteer basis. All funds raised go to support the mission. So don't forget to love, not like, our podcast and subscribe. We have quite a few amazing guests booked for future episodes. Trust me, you won't want to miss them. So subscribe today. We hope you will also connect with us at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, where you can donate to the mission, read blog posts such as Linda's, and stay in the loop about upcoming events, including fundraising auctions. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Recovery Advocate Network and on Twitter at Rand to Wellness. If you wish to provide feedback, please feel free to leave comments on the episode or email us. Now, back to your coffee.